Welcome back to Designsmith. In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up your guides and your grids specifically for your Swiss posters and according to size. Before we get started, please subscribe to support the channel. Alright, so I have the international sizes set up right here in Illustrator. If you're in the United States like I am, you may or may not have seen these sizes before. And there are many more of these international sizes, but you're probably not going to be designing posters beyond the A4. So let's go ahead and run through these really quick. This one right here is A0. The millimeters are 841 by 1189, and this is the closest size to our 36 by 48. So this is a fairly large poster. It's larger than what you would typically find in a store, and it's something that you would see in maybe a large setting like on the side of a building or on a subway in New York City or something like that. The next one is A1. The millimeters are 594 by 841. This is going to be like our 24 by 36, which is a very common size here in the United States. This is what we typically consider to be our large size poster without being giant. Alright, then the A2 is 420 by 594 millimeters, and this is going to be closer to our 18 by 24. Still a large size, but not considered to be a very small size either, which is large but not small, and small but not large. In my opinion, 18 by 24 is kind of the perfect size for whatever you're trying to go for, and it's the most common poster size that I use personally. A3 is 297 by 420 millimeters, and this is going to be very, very close to our 11 by 17, which is probably the most common poster size in the United States. It's large enough for people to see from a fairly good distance, while also being small enough to put on your wall without taking up too much space. And lastly for this video, we have A4, which is 210 millimeters by 297 millimeters. This is going to be the closest to like an 8 by 10 or maybe an 8 by 12. So when it comes down to actually laying a grid down for these posters, what's the best practice? Well, it kind of really depends on a few different things. Are you wanting something to have a little bit more of an elegant feel to it? Or do you want your text to maybe run close to the edge or run off the edge? It really just kind of depends. What I'll do in this video is show you the basic practices for setting up the actual grid and the spacing. And then from that point, you can kind of use those foundations and adjust the settings for what you're wanting to do in your own posters. And let's go ahead and start with the A0 poster here. And with a poster this large, I'm going to want to start at least 2 inches from the sides. I want a nice healthy margin on the outside of it because typically I find it works best to give it a little bit more of a margin. But of course, depending on what you're wanting to do, you may want the text to run off the sides of the poster. And in that case, I generally don't worry about the guides too much, but I do make sure that they are at least adhering to the side of a guide. So I have my rulers pulled up here, but I'm going to go ahead and hide them so I can show you how to show them. So go up here to View, Rulers, and Show Rulers. And if you're on Mac, you would hit Command R, and if you're on Windows, you'd hit Control R. So I'm going to go right over here to my rulers and just drag a guide right here. And the placement right here doesn't matter at this point because we're going to use our transform and align panel to get it exactly where we want. So with my guide selected, the very first thing I'm going to do is go over here to Align to Artboard, and we can go over here to Horizontal Align Left, and that way it puts it right there at the 0. You can also just type in 0 right here in the transform panel. And even though we're in millimeters, we can still type in 2 inches. So if we type in 2 inches, it'll automatically do that conversion for us. And then we can do the same thing for the rest of the guides. So here for the top, I'm going to just pull this down right here, and I'm going to type in 0 for our Y value, and then type in 2 inches. Now you probably just figured out that you don't have to reset it to 0 before you type in the 2 inches. I just wanted to let you know that you can do it either way. So there's 2 different ways that we can lay down new guides right here. We can go back over to the rulers and drag out another one, or we can select this guide, hold down Option or Alt, and just click and drag it over. And we have a duplicate guide right here. And now we need to change our reference point to the right side since we're on the right side of the artboard. And I don't know what that Y value would be in millimeters because I don't work with millimeters. So I'm just going to rely on my Align panel, and we're going to click on Horizontal Align Right. And now with this selected, I'm going to hit the Enter key on my keyboard, and this is going to bring up our Move tool. And for our horizontal position, I'm going to type in -2 inches, and vertical, I'm just going to set to 0, and then hit OK. And then we'll bring down another one from the top, and I'm going to align this to the bottom. And now I'm going to hit Enter again to bring up my Move tool, and we'll zero out horizontal, and then just type in -2 inches. So now we've got the outer margins of our poster set up here. And now we need to create a grid. So if you've seen my last Swiss grid setup, you'll notice that I always set an odd number of columns and rows for Swiss design. And this isn't necessarily a hard and fast rule. This is just something that I have found that works best in Swiss Design in all of the posters that I've done research for. Most of the time when I see a grid setup for Swiss Design, it's in odd numbers. So let's go ahead and just duplicate a guide right here, and then we'll do it one more time. And you'll notice that we've got 1, 2, and 3 right here. Now for larger poster sizes, I will increase that number. So I go up and add 2 more, and now we've got 5 across. However, we need to make sure that these guides are nice and evenly distributed, otherwise we don't have a proper grid. So let's select all of these grid lines going across, and now we're going to go over here to our line panel and change this to Align to Selection. And now it's going to equally distribute the spacing between those guidelines right there. And just so you know, it's using these 2 outer guides as our borders. And so now we can click on Horizontal Distribute Space, and we've got equal spacing going across. And since we have 5 going across here, our poster is taller than it is narrow. So naturally we need to have more grid lines going down the page than we have going across it. So I'm going to hold down Option and just bring this down here. And I'm just going to hit Command D to duplicate these. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you can leave it at 7 if you want to, but I'm going to add 2 more so that we have 9 going down. And that's not any fancy math or anything, that just gives us a proper grid to work with, and it is easier to work with your elements inside the grid if your grid is more like a square rather than rectangles. So with all of our horizontal guides selected, make sure that Align to Selection is selected, and now go to Vertical Distribute Space, and now all of our horizontal and vertical guidelines are equally distributed. So this would be the setup that I would go for an A0 poster. We have 5 squares going across and 9 squares going down. And if you want to make subquadrants, then you'll just make a duplicate of this guide right here, and then you'll just keep doing that going across. And now select everything going across and distribute your spacing, and then we'll do the same thing horizontally. Now keep in mind, as you're making all of these duplicates, it doesn't matter where you're putting them, all that matters is where you eventually align them. So now select all of these going across and vertically distribute the space. So now they're all perfectly spaced out. And you can keep making more and more subquadrants here. It's not really necessary, but as you're adding more and more elements to your poster, you'll find it's a lot easier to align to if you have more grid options to place them to. And typically, if I'm working with subquadrants, I'll make 1 set and that's it. Okay, so this would be my grid setup for the A0 size. Okay, so just kind of keep this in mind. You've got small posters, medium posters, and large posters. For the larger size posters, I typically go about 2 inches out for the margins. So I'll do the exact same thing here for the A1 size. Okay, so here's the same initial setup for this size right here. However, since it is a much smaller poster, I'm going to change the sections going down to 7 instead of 9. So let's make a copy of this guide right here. And so now we have 2 sections, and now let's hit Command D until we get to 9. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And let's keep making duplicates until we hit 7. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now we can select all of these guides right here and go to Vertical Distribute Space. And we can still have 5 going across. So we have 2, 3, 4, 5. And now we'll align all of these and we'll click on Distribute Space. And this visual right here is exactly why we use 7 instead of 9, because this is much closer to a square than this is. And so in general, your best practice is to make your guides look more like a square than a rectangle. So to recap, A0 has 2 inches of outer margin and 5 columns going across and 9 rows going down. And A1 has a 2-inch outer margin with 5 columns going across and 7 rows going down. And so basically, if you want to make sure that you've got it perfect every single time, you can follow this formula right here for your larger posters. Now, if you get even larger than A0, then I would probably go to something like a 3-inch margin or maybe even a 4-inch margin, but it really does depend on your poster size. All right, so let's go over here to View and Guides and Clear Guides. And this size right here is what I would call a medium-sized poster. So typically for this, I'll do anything between 1 and 1.5 inches. So let's say we do 1.5 inches here, and you see that because of the relative size here, it's encroaching on where the artwork would be about the same amount as it would for the larger posters. And so we'll just follow this exact same suit right here. And this would be the size that I would use if you want a little bit more of an elegant feel to it. If your poster isn't going to communicate elegance, then feel free to use 1 inch right here. And for a poster of this size, I would probably go 3 across and 5 down. And of course you can switch it up if you want to add more columns and rows, or if you just want to keep on adding subquadrants, just follow the formula and you'll be fine. But generally for medium poster sizes, my foundation is 3x5, and I just find that it works best if I do it that way. And so here is a very safe formula for your medium-sized posters. 1.5 inch margin, 3 columns, 5 rows. And feel free to add subquadrants, and also feel free to adjust, but just keep in mind to use odd numbers for your columns and your rows. And then for the small posters, I keep this between 1/2 inch and 1 inch. So for this poster, this would be closer to an 11x17. So here is a 1 inch margin all the way around everything, and it still gives you plenty of room to work with in placing all of your elements. And typically for this size, I'll also do 3 across and 5 down. Now generally for these small poster sizes, depending on what I'm designing, I will add subquadrants, or I'll just make it 5 across and 7 down instead. So here's a good formula for you to use for this size range of posters. Anywhere from 1/2 inch to 1 inch margin, 3 to 5 columns, and 5 to 7 rows. And just keep this in mind that in general, the more outside margin you add, the more elegant your poster will look. And you and your client have to decide whether or not you want that poster to exude elegance. So make sure that you have that conversation with your client first. And then this right here, I don't even really consider this to be a poster. I consider it more of a flyer. And personally, I never go more than 1/2 inch margin here, because this right here is what 1 inch looks like. And personally, I think that's too far in. However, if we go 1/2 inch in, I would consider this to be the bare minimum. So if you want a more elegant look, then I would say 0.75 inches would be the way to go. And even that's pushing it a little bit, but we'll use this for the example. So I'll do the exact same thing all around the sides here. Okay, so there's our outer margin, and now let's make some duplicates of our guide right here. And because this is a smaller poster size, you're going to tend to use smaller elements. And so I just go ahead and set up for a 5-column layout right from the start. And depending on what I'm designing, I may or may not use subquadrants. And so here's a pretty fail-safe formula for your flyers. A minimum of 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch, and 5 columns going across, and 7 rows going down. And here's everything at a glance, just in case you want to take a screenshot. I hope this video was helpful to you in getting all of your Swiss poster files set up. If it was, please give this video a like and hit subscribe to support the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.